If you are in the journey of developing your photography style, I think this video is for you. A photography style is that set of recurring elements that occur in your photos, and the more consistent you are with them, the easier it's gonna be for the viewer to link those pictures together and recognize them as the work of one single photographer that goes by your name. Finding your photography style is an incredibly difficult thing to do. But today I want to try and give you some elements to help you in that journey and perhaps make it a little bit easier. Now, I'm sure that when you refer to other people's photography style, you're actually thinking about how they color grade their pictures. And I think the reason for that is that color is one of the most important things in a picture. So in order to find your color grading style, you have to understand what are the basic rules behind the use of color. And once you have mastered those rules, then you can start thinking about making them yours and perhaps stick to a particular color grading style that is recurrent across all of your images. The risk of not doing that is that our style will constantly change over time and we will never settle for something that we actually like. Because our taste evolves and so does our editing. I don't think that a style is something actually fixed, but it also evolves with you. But if you have a direction, it will evolve in that direction. So it's better to understand all of this concept now, and then once you're further ahead in the photography journey, then you will be able to make those improvements without disrupting what you've been building up in the last few years. This is at least my experience, and I like to refer to color harmonies, well-known color harmonies, when it comes to retouching my pictures, so that I know that those kind of colors that I'm using for my editing, they kind of belong together and they all make sense when they are in the same pictures together. So I hope this topic sounds good to you. Now let's jump into the presentation I prepared so we can look at some examples of my pictures and how I recreated those color harmonies in there, and we can study together those color harmonies. So let's first define what color harmonies are and how they can be useful to find our color grading style. So color harmonies are a combination of color that work well together and are aesthetically pleasing. So if we stick to one of these color harmonies, we have the certainty that color-wise our picture is going to be fine. There are several different color harmonies, and the first one I want to show you is the monochromatic. Monochromatic is what happens when we choose just one hue and we decide to use that hue across our whole image. Like in this case, the river is composed by several different shades of green. The hue is always the same, but the saturation and brightness value change across the image. It happens the same thing with black and white photos. Black and white photos are basically a monochromatic color harmony, and that's why they have been working so well for several hundred years. The reason why I really like monochromatic is that it makes you think about simple scene, where you have only one subject and you try to exclude everything else just to make the image as clear as possible for the viewer. Then we move on to a similar color harmony. This time it's called analogous, and instead of fixing the hue, this time we fix saturation and brightness, and we choose a bunch of hues on the same side of the color wheel. As you can see here, the hue and the saturation and brightness doesn't shift, but the hue, we have selected a bunch of different hues all on the same side. And this really helps when you want to describe a picture that is soft and you don't want to have a lot of strong color contrast in your picture. Then we move on to complementary. Complementary is probably the most used color harmony, not only in photography, but in cinematography as well. And the reason for that, I think it's quite clear. Basically, by creating color contrast in your picture, you make your subject stand out really well, and it almost looks like that the photo is sharper than it actually is. This is a super powerful color harmony. It's mostly used as teal and orange. I imagine you have seen some photos like that, but it can really be used with any hue that are opposite to one another on the color wheel. Of course, if you're shooting something that is natural or where you have skin tones, don't go crazy in shifting their skin or the grass color to blue, because that's not gonna look reasonable to your brain, because grass is usually not green, but any shade of green, that would do the job. Then we move on to analogous complementary. Now we have just meshed together the previous two color harmonies to create a third one. Basically, the concept here is that we choose a bunch of hues on one side of the color wheel that are balanced out by just one hue at the very opposite of the color wheel. I really love this color harmony because it makes you be a bit more creative, and although you don't see this color usually in nature, but they still work together and your brain is not offended by this image just because the color harmony is actually respected. So even though you have a hue that is actually not found in nature, you can still see this image and think, oh, okay, this is reasonable actually. And that's the power of color harmonies, really. Then we go to split complementary. Split complementary is basically a slight variation of the complementary scheme, and instead of picking just two hues that are opposite to one another, we choose one hue on one side of the color wheel and then two hues that are equally distant from the hue that should be in the middle. Like in this case, for this green and this blue, they are equally distant from the cyan that should have been here in the middle. And this is quite easy to find in nature, especially when you have lakes. I found myself to use this color harmony quite a lot. Then we move on to triadic. Triadic is exactly what it says. So three different hues that this time they are evenly spaced on the color wheel and they form kind of a triangle. We have the beak of the puffin that is red, and then we have the blue of the ocean and the yellow of the rock that are opposing each other. Then we go to the double complementary. This is again basically what the name says, and it's basically just two complementary scheme that cross each other onto the color wheel and they balance each other this way. So here we have the orange of the trees that is balanced out by the cyan of the sky, and then we have the green of the grass and the trees that is balanced out by the color of the boat. And these are basically all the color harmonies I wanted to show you. There are other color harmonies that are a slight variation of those, but I think if you stick with those and you try and really understand how they work and how you can use them in your pictures, you will be all settled to find your color grading style starting from this point. Now let's jump into Lightroom and see which tools we have at our disposal to work with these color harmonies and to shift colors around so that we can recreate some of those. Alright, so here we are in Lightroom, and today I want to introduce you to this fantastic tool called Calibration. What we can do here is modify the hue of a particular color, and that's exactly what we want to do to recreate these color harmonies, because when we shot something, our subject most likely will not have a perfect color harmony, but we can shift the hues in a way that then we can correct the colors in the scene and make them look like the color harmony we were shooting for. So let's say here we want to go for one of the most famous one, that's the teal and orange complementary color harmony. And the way we can do that is by using these sliders here. But let me explain first how these sliders work. You can imagine to have for each one of these slider, red primary, green primary and blue primary, a stick on top of this wheel that rotates in the direction of where we move this slider to. So if we move the red slider towards more magenta, and if you imagine to have a stick that goes from red to cyan, if we move this slider to the left, that means that the stick is going to rotate counterclockwise this direction. And since red is the opposite color of cyan, that means that the cyan color will shift counterclockwise towards green. So if I now move this slider all the way to magenta, you see that red have disappeared and now we have a lot more magenta on our color wheel, and also the green that was, the cyan that was here shifted much more towards green. So now let's say that we want to make this image, instead of having all of these colors, we want to have just the complementary colors, teal and orange. What we have to do is basically just shifting the hues around so that all other hues will disappear and only the two that we like will stay. So we want the reds to shift towards orange. So we go ahead and shift the red primary towards orange. So now red has disappeared and we have this gradation that goes from orange all the way towards yellow. Now we want to do the same thing with blues. We don't want pure blue, but we want all of these shades of blue to become actually more teal kind of color. So we shift this all the way to the left, and as you can see, we have already removed most of the hues that were in this color wheel, and we are basically left with just two hues. And one more thing to notice is that when we shifted the blue primary towards teal, also the yellows that are the opposite color of blue have become more orangey. And that's again because you have to imagine to have this stick here that if you move it on one side, the other end is going to move on the other side. So the yellows will become orange and the blues will become more teal. So we do that once again. And now the only two colors that are left is this slight green and this light magenta. And if we now move again the green primary slider towards yellow, we'll see that these greens will become more yellowish and these magentas here will become more bluish. So let's go ahead and do that. And there you go. We have basically removed all of the colors that were on this color wheel, and we are now left with just the two complementary colors that we wanted to have in the first place. This is the power of the calibration tool, and you can basically do this for any of the color scheme and the color harmonies you want to achieve. I'm going to shoot another video very soon where I will show you how this works with real images and how you can achieve those color harmonies by using this tool. So if you are interested into that, please consider to subscribe and leave a like to this video if you liked it. I hope this video was helpful. It was a lot of fun to make it, and I can't wait to make more of them. So thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.